What does deer camp mean to you?
You know, for me, it's about having a sense of adventure and building like a catalog of adventurous memories in different places. I get bored doing the same thing kind of over and over, but when we're in a trailer, I can do whatever the hell I want because he doesn't care. And that's like, to me, that's part of the awesome thing is like, I could be in a bad mood. I know that he's going to be positive, and regardless of what happened. It could be the worst freaking day on earth. And I know there'll be some moral support there to like get me back up, or vice versa. Sometimes it's a very serious kind of attitude, and then there's other times where we're like chilling, drinking whiskey, having a glass of bourbon. The most important thing for me is like always having one of us there that's being positive.
Sure.
And both of us like just willing to work your nuts off.
Having the right person, buddy to go with is the most important thing, aside from like you even knowing what you're doing from like a deer hunting standpoint.
Sure.
Right? Because it will be a broken trip if you don't have that to start with. I think the thing that I would add is like, I remember things in pictures. If I'm trying to remember something or whatever, I take a mental picture of it. And so for me, it's even like beyond whenever we're out hunting. Like I walk into the trailer at my house to like get something out of it, and I can immediately see you sitting on the floor eating food out of a can that you never heat up. I can see you hitting your head off the trailer door 3 days in a row, and you haven't figured out yet that you need to duck after you've been in it for like 3 different trips. It's stuff like that. It's like those pictures in time. It's almost like a photo album. Like when I get old, I'll think back on it, that those are some of the best times of my life. And that to me is really what the camp is about.
Lights,
camera,
follow the trail.
ready to shoot.
If you know where a deer's bedding and you know where he's eating, that deer should be dead.
Camera.
If you're passive on a deer, what you're doing is you're teaching them.
I've got 30 bucks in the Michigan record book. Everyone but one has had at least one previous wound on his body. Some had as many as 4.
Trail Cam Radio.
From the guys at Exodus.
All right, we're live. We're live. We have Clint here. This is day 1, episode 2. Day 1 of the trade show, episode 2.
Yeah, I was gonna say that I missed one.
Yeah, well, you were
I was
wrestling.
not on that one.
You were wrestling.
I was wrestling.
Yeah, you're the second leg of this for the evening.
Very nice.
So yeah, I guess for folks that apparently a lot of people know you because when you're at the booth, you were pinned down most of the day.
Yeah, it was good to see. It was good to see people, man. I'm always happy when people come out and want to talk deer hunting. It's always good to get to meet people that either, listen to this podcast and have heard me because I've been on a couple times, or listen to mine, or just as cool to meet new people that you've never, they've never met before, and talk to other deer hunters from different places and trade stories, tactics, strategies, and it's just it's cool, man. There's not another show like this. It can be a grind because it's long, but it's always good. We didn't have it last year,
right?
So it's kind of nice to feel like there's a little bit of normalcy.
Yeah, for sure. Well, it's 2 years ago. A lot has honestly changed. We were talking. There's familiar faces, but a lot less, quite frankly.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I mean, for a variety of reasons, quite frankly.
Mm-hmm. From a vendor perspective, or even just from
a vendor perspective.
Yeah.
I mean, there's some of the regular customers that came through today, see every year, but some new vendors and some old vendors have left.
Yeah, and I think too, it's like even like the landscape of faces that are, in the media space even. It's weird because I don't know, I've been doing the podcast for 6 years, I guess now. And like even in that 6 years, I can see like the rollover change of like those that were here whenever I kind of started, and were maybe people that people knew about or were growing or whatever the case was, and to where a lot of those folks are gone, or they've moved on to something different, or and then there's a bunch of new people that are kind of like have entered in or whatever, and maybe I'm just old, which might be part of it, But it's just it's cool to see that there's still people that are super stoked about it and want to jump in and have a passion for it. So that's always cool.
Yeah, certainly. And last time I think we all recorded here was, speaking of last trade show, was what, 2020? 2020 at the other Airbnb.
Yeah.
Where you announced none other the Whitetail Quest.
Yeah, it's been a struggle.
You jinxed yourself.
I know. And I said it on that podcast. Like, I shouldn't even say this. Yeah, I mean, I had a chance to hunt a couple other states, since then. And the weird thing is not for lacking for opportunity, really, because I think since then, I'm trying to think, like in between that, I've done Missouri, Ohio, which I already had, but not, there was a particular piece I really want to kill a deer on.
Right.
And then Kansas this year, and then a new piece in PA, which I really want to kill a deer on a big woods piece, but just different states. There's really 2, but a couple out of state trips, and I think I talked about this on a previous podcast that we did together with you guys, but stuck one in Missouri and lost it, which was a heartbreaker, but it happens. Had a good like Pope and Young buck on that big piece of public in Ohio, and the very last day that I was there that I let walk because I thought I was going to come back. Ended up not being able to make it back. And then Kansas this year was just, we were there for 14, 15 days, I think.
14 days.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I felt like I got my ass kicked pretty good for about 12, 11 of those. I had a good encounter like the first day I was there, which probably gave me higher hopes than I should have had. And then things just kind of went sideways. Chad, of course, killed a really, really good one. Yeah. And then we just kind of spent time. I mean, we spent days driving, and I don't want to, beat this up because I know we've talked about it at different capacities, but just a lot of driving. And then we finally found a piece where there was where we were seeing deer and were able to glass bucks, and Cherokee style cut one off, got to within 20 yards of you had a look at it. I didn't even see it. It was about 160 inches.
Yep, big deer.
I was 20 yards from it, but I was tucked in between 3 cedars. He could see it because he was filming, and he was a little bit away, I don't know what it was, 15, 20 yards maybe away from me or whatever the case was.
Yeah, I was up on the bank.
Yeah, so he could see it. I couldn't see it. I could hear it, and I turned the wrong way in between these cedars and just kind of got turned around, and by the time I could get turned back around, that deer had already kind of passed me. That was on the ground, and then we caught up to him again. Mm-hmm. Then we bumped him out of that draw again, and then we had a good beat on him.
That was the same night.
I was saying, this is all like within a couple hours. Yeah. So we glassed him, saw him coming into this draw with a doe.
Late morning.
Ran, cut him off, saw him within 20 yards. I couldn't see him and didn't get drawn on him. We went to this frag kind of setup that we saw that doe cut into.
Yep.
Thought he would scent check that. We set up on that. He never came back. Chad was like, I'm going to go get the decoy. So we left the decoy in the truck when we jumped out to cut that deer off. Well, on the way back to get the decoy.
Which we're set up like on this little patch of Fragmito where the doe kind of ran into. We're on a downwind side of that. I can see the truck from where we're set up. Like we're 80 yards, like kind of tucked on the side of the CRP field with some sporadic cedars in it. So we're like 80 yards from the truck, and there's basically a small section of CRP and a ditch that goes up to the road. There's a parking lot there. Kind of a weird setup.
Yeah.
But so whenever Chad was headed back to the truck, because we, like I said, we didn't grab a decoy or anything, and we sat there at that kind of that frag set up on the side of this bank, and he's like, we should get that decoy in case anything kind of comes around this, because we didn't have a ton of cover there.
No.
And there was a tree that was behind us. We didn't really want to get to the tree because it was going to cut off our visibility down completely to the bottom, and we probably wasn't going to get a shot if a deer was looping around that down there. Mm-hmm. And so he was like, you know what, do you think I should get that? One of us should go get, is what you said, one of us should go get that decoy. And I still was the only one who had a tag, right? So, he was like, you just stay here. I'll run back and get the decoy, and I'll be right back. So he gets up to go, and I'm sitting there, and I mean, you guys know Chad as well as anybody. My man, other than just like a couple minutes ago when we thought he was going to die from laughing, doesn't get excited about a whole lot, right?
Uh-huh. I think you could say, like, Chad, you just won the Mega Millions.
Chad be like,
congratulations. Like, cool. All right.
Like, I should probably talk to the financial planner and see what I'm going to do with that money. Yeah. Like, that would be the extent of the excitement, I think we're going to buy a can of chew. Like, maybe you should buy 2 this time, since you never buy any more than 1 and always seem to run out. So on that day, I saw Chad get more animated than I've seen in our entire 6-year friendship. And it
twice.
Yeah, twice. When he saw that big deer the first time, he's waving at me, he's going, big deer, and he's mouthing it to me like I can hear him. The deer bounds away, and he comes if anyone's ever spent any time with Chad in the woods, you got freakishly long legs, and he just glides through the woods. Doesn't even look like he's walking. It looks like he's just hovering and moving straight across. He's just it's so quick. And he was however far away from me, and he just comes flying across the timber going, there's a giant deer. And I thought he was mad at me for not seeing it. I'm like, dude, is he pissed at me for not seeing this deer? And then I finally realized, no, he's just super excited, but I'd never seen that before. So I couldn't tell, is this anger?
Yeah.
Or is this just excitement? And so I realized it was excitement. So then we set up on that frag. He goes back to get the decoy, and I'm looking, and my man just comes running. I don't even know why you're running.
I don't know.
And we talked about that afterwards, because he's running toward me he's in the draw. He's in the draw. giant buck. And so I get up. He takes off running toward the deer. Mind you, he doesn't have a bow or nor a tag. And he's just
Pure
like
vengeance.
sprinting toward like where the deer was from. So I just naturally, I'm like, I'm going to run too. You know what I mean? So
I wish someone could have had a drone footage of this entire.
It was the most ridiculous thing anyone could have ever seen. And so we ended up bumping that deer out of there. And then we kind of stopped for a second. Was like, all right, well, let's like get our stuff together and figure out.
Think about this.
Yeah, instead of just like running after deer, you know, because that's essentially what we're doing right now. There was a CRP field and then a cedar, like a line of cedars and like a cedar draw that kind of made a T essentially. And so the way the wind was, we were like, you know what, if we loop around, and we were looking on the map and we could see there was a field up there of some sort, but we didn't know what. We didn't know if it was, you know, what was around. A lot of what was around there, at least in that particular area, was winter wheat on some of those fields that were on these tops or whatever. And so we thought that that's probably what it was. And so we were like, well, let's head up there and see if we can see if there's a setup. And so we played the wind correctly, kind of looped all the way around it and got up there, and we had the awesome setup for this. It ended up being a cut bean field. And so we were like, man, all right, cool. This is going to happen. There was 2 trails that were kind of leading in and almost kind of converging into the bean field coming out of that cedar draw. And we were like, man, if he is in that cedar draw, which we would have swore he was in there.
Yeah.
And we were like, they got to come here. And so we were almost like, I wouldn't put money on many hunts. You know,
That was one of them.
That was one where it's like, if you would have said, Ben, any amount of money that matters to you on this hunt, would you do it? I would have said, yeah. I feel like this is like a solid 8 to 9 out of 10 that we're gonna have at least an encounter that get the possibility to get a shot off, and it just never happened.
Ghost
Town. Now we did have
that was towards the end of the trip too, wasn't it?
That was like day 10 maybe, or day 11, something like that.
It was on the tail end. Yeah.
Okay.
And
That was the first day we were on that specific parcel or that specific.
What day did you kill?
that was day 6 or something like that, wasn't it?
Day 4.
Day 4.
Day 4.
It was the 11th, right?
Yeah.
It was your
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, day 4.
So that setup was a bust. But the other thing that happened was so that was the second half of that trip, which the first week there was that Saturday, I want to say, that we got there was the youth pheasant hunt, right? So a ton of people out. But then that whole following week, there's nothing. The last weekend, though, pheasant season opens. So every day then after that, you know, we were battling a lot of pheasant hunters because pheasant in Kansas, like pheasant hunting is bigger than deer hunting.
It's
You
for
know what I mean?
residents.
Like legit. And so we were dealing with having pheasant hunters pretty much anywhere we were going. And so when we were set up on that deer at the head of that kind of cedar thicket or cedar draw, there was someone working a dog in that. I don't know which CRP field it was in. I couldn't tell if it was on the lower side on the opposite side of the road or if it was on the side of the road that we were on.
Right.
Just below those cedars. So someone was running dogs in there, and it could have easily just blown out those deer that were in there, or they could have hung tight and just never made it to us, or whatever the case was. So, but regardless, we didn't see it. And then you ended up headed home either that day or the next day. I don't remember. I think it was not the next day, but the day after. I think you were there one more day or 2 more days.
Yeah, something like that.
And the end of the net really is that we saw a couple bucks, but nothing to really get on. Then the next to last day that I was there, I went to this piece. When we were driving out the night before, we almost hit a decent 10-point. You know, he's probably in the 30s or whatever.
Good deer.
Almost ran across the road. It was running right along the truck and almost ran into the truck as we were driving next to it. And on that way out, there was actually a small farm. And when I say the word farm, I use that term really loosely. It was really just a piece of property with a couple buildings on it, but they had QDM signs like posted. So they were practicing QDM, and the most deer we saw kind of in one spot was in a cut cornfield that they had when we were leaving, and that was at the end of this public block. And so I was like, well, the next morning he had to go pick his deer up, and then was gonna leave. I was like, I'm gonna get up and just come in with a little bit of daylight into that CRP down near the bottom side of that creek bottom where it starts to get ready to merge with the private, because they have food. Deer are obviously comfortable down there.
Right.
These guys
They're holding them more than likely.
Yeah, and these guys aren't killing scrubs. You know, I was like, so I ended up going down there, getting set up with just like a little bit of light. I was in a CRP field that went into a creek bottom. Essentially, I was in a ghillie jacket and I didn't have like any cover really other than like the CRP around me. And my plan was really just to let daylight crack, and then I wanted to glass that creek bottom to figure out where I was going to go set up. You know, I had my saddle gear with me, but I was kind of planning on hunting from the ground unless there was a tree I could get into, because there was just a lot of big cottonwoods down there and some locust trees that you weren't really able to climb. So I was going to move, and then about the time I was thinking of moving, I had a decoy set up and did that while it was still kind of dark enough out, just in case I saw something to take the attention off me. And then a doe walked behind me at like 5 yards, and I was like, this doe's going to blow me up. But I had the wind, so I was all right, and she just ended up walking right by me. And I was just getting ready to move. I saw this patch of 3 cedars that were down on the bottom. And while I was glassing and looking around, as I was getting a little bit of daylight before that doe got there, I saw a very fresh scrape off to your left. Now, we all know that second week in November, it's like if you're finding scrapes, like they better be super fresh because they're probably likely cold at that point, right? It's not like the last week of October where they're like the prime source or whatever. But there were a fresh scrape that was there that clearly was tended like the night before, right? And like 2 fresh rubs and another fresh scrape that was to my right as well. And I was like, all right. I was like, I feel like I'm in the right spot. We saw that bigger buck that we almost ran over, right? And then we saw the chasing that was just kind of up above this area in those like wheat field and the CRP field. It was kind of up above the creek bottom. So when I glassed that patch of cedars, I was like, that's where I ultimately want to get to. Well, then after that doe got by me, I just saw tines coming through the timber, and I was like, oh man, and it was a good buck. It was high 140s, 150-ish, buck, good looking deer. And he came in and made a scrape and was going to kind of turn away. He saw the decoy but didn't pay it much mind. And then he went to turn away to head up that cedar draw. And I let him just get far enough away where I knew he couldn't see me and snort wheezed him. And he snapped his head around and turned back around and made another scrape and was just all kind of fired up, right? Then he was made. So the way he was coming in, like I thought for sure he was going to come in toward where my decoy was. And I really wasn't set up well. It was like just kind of a hasty decoy set up just to, in case something happened, I need to get the attention off of me or whatever. But my intention was to move and get like 30, maybe 40 yards a little further into that bottom or whatever. If I would have got to where I wanted to get to and left the decoy where I was at, like it was a slam dunk 20-yard shot, he would have never known I was never would have known I was there. Instead, after he hit that scrape, made that scrape, there was a piece of down brush that kind of fell off in this little kind of drop off, this bank that rolled down maybe like 5 feet. And it went in down like this flat part that kind of was part of the creek bottom, but the bottom kind of made like a little bit of like a lazy L almost, you know what I mean? And that down tree was here right by that scrape, and he just kind of got to there, saw the decoy, kind of puffed up a little bit, walked stiff-legged, and then turned. I didn't know this because I didn't see it yet at this point. I saw it after I had moved. But there was a trail that went down along that side of that that downfall in that brush. Well, he walked down there, and my scent and my thermal, I'm dropping milkweed, and I'm just watching it drop into this creek bottom, or the bottom where that doe went, and ultimately where he was going to try to go to scent check me. And I'm like, supposed to have a 7-mile-per-hour wind that day that would have been, I think, out of the north, and would have just moved my thermal just enough, like to give me an opportunity. And I'm like, he's gonna bust me. Like he's gonna get my scent. And now he's hit that trail and he's walking. I'm like, man, he hasn't busted me. I think I'm gonna get a shot. And when his head got behind enough brush where I couldn't see his eyes, I drew. I'm just holding at full draw, holding. He's still coming. And he hits the end of that brush where I need like 2 more steps, and he just stops. I could see the front of his tines. I could see the tip of his nose, and I could see the front of his feet. And he just stood there licking, smelling, licking. And at that point, I was like, yeah, I'm busted. I was like, the jig's up, But I kept, held full draw, and he just turned around and walked away. And, I let my bow down, of course, and was pissed, because it was like yay close to like happening. And I let him get out of eyesight again, and I just cracked the antlers real quick. I was like, maybe I'm going to throw a Hail Mary. It's like my next to last day. I was like, So I cracked the antlers together. He never came back. I went to get up to move. I gave it a couple minutes, and I went to get up to move. So I was like, I really want to get to those cedars. Another buck came in as I was moving. And I got caught like in mid-move, right? That buck saw me, ran off. I tried to grab the decoy, move to the cedars. Another buck came in. I ended up seeing like 4 bucks within like a half hour or whatever. And all but one of them caught me like moving because I was in between like trying to move and get to where I wanted to get to. And these deer just kind of kept showing up. So there must have been a hot doe that was in the area, which is why they hit the, ripped up those scrapes. And because those other deer heard the noise that was going on, they were like, oh man, what's going on over there? There's a lady over there. So they wanted to come get in on the action. So that was the last day. So I didn't feel that tag.
Dang. So you've hunted Kansas, Iowa, Ohio, Pennsylvania. Is Kansas your favorite?
Oh man. Hunting style, yes. Sightings, no.
No.
No, Iowa's still my favorite for sightings. Like, and it might change a little bit. And we talked to a fair amount of locals while we were out there, and like the consensus that we got from them is they've had a pretty good run, at least in that area of EHD. And
In Kansas?
Yeah, in Kansas. And it made sense when Chad and I were talking about it afterwards, because like we were expecting when we were driving in Glass and
To see a bunch of deer just
yeah,
running
to
around.
see, like even if we weren't seeing like really really good deer, just to see a volume is what we were kind of expecting.
A volume of like 120s to 140s.
Right.
Sure.
Was like the expectation.
The nice buck category.
Yeah,
Yeah,
which
like,
is what we were kind of chasing
that
to
was-
begin with.
yeah.
Yeah, that was like,
Like
we
we had
weren't.
spot and stock a 130-inch deer, man. That's a freaking awesome experience.
Yeah, yeah. And so once we kind of learned that, what we realized was like, man, we're seeing, and I'll say a lot because, you know, being from Pennsylvania, like I don't see this many top end bucks in general in a season, and we saw probably like I forget we counted, it was like five or six
yeah.
that were like in like the 150 to 170
Yeah.
like plus category.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's pretty good, man. If you can get visual of 5 deer that are between, you know, 150 and 170 plus inches, like that's good. And then we were seeing like 1 and 2 year olds that were in like the 110s, 115, like really good young deer, but just young. We weren't really seeing any of those
So, yeah, that
3 and
plays
4
out.
year olds that are like Pope and Young to like 140, 145. Like we just weren't seeing those, you know? And so that's why I say Kansas from, Kansas from an experience perspective, because I really grew to love like hunting whitetails on the ground. Like it's just super cool. You know, it's just getting close on the ground is just like, there's nothing like it. You know, it's hard. It's more challenging, but the experience is just super cool. But the way the deer behaved and acted in Iowa was equally as fun as experiencing it as hunting on the ground.
Sure.
Because everything worked, at least on the trip that I was out there. Like finding magnum scrapes, they were tending them frequently. You know what I mean? You hit the antlers together. If there was a deer within earshot, it was coming. You snort wheeze one in, he's going to rake a tree and get pissed off. You know what I mean? And give you a show. So it was like all those things that was cool. And it was a really great learning experience because I got to watch a lot more mature deer on that trip in Iowa in that trip than I might get to watch in 3 full seasons of hunting in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
And so getting to be able to watch mature deer do mature deer things and just see them, you know, act like they normally act is something that like I just don't get very often. And so building that Rolodex of like deer behavior knowledge, you know, it's like, man, I got like 3 seasons worth in that 2-week trip.
Yeah.
You know,
It's huge.
and so, you know, so for me, that's why Iowa is still one of those places that, all things considered, has probably been my favorite experience because of how much more I learned. But Kansas was awesome just because I love hunting on the ground. And I think, you know, next year I think is going to be really good in Kansas, as long as they don't have any bad kind of, knock on wood, you know, as long as they don't have any bad juju as far as like with EHD and stuff like that, because those areas you should see those 3 and 4 year olds next year, which will make it a lot of fun. You know,
Yeah.
just being able to see volume of deer.
Yep.
Yeah. Iowa, I mean, we spend a little bit of time in there, and I'm in Illinois, but Iowa just has a different aura. It's unmatched, in my opinion. Even just walking any parcel there or spending time in there and talking to folks at Whitetail Cribs is just a different aura, which I hunted in Kansas this past year as well. Not the same aura. Now, I was in a different part of Kansas, but Iowa to me is, I haven't hunted it yet, but just top tier.
Yeah, it is. And I think part of it too, I think the experience in Kansas is the way we, like how we set out to hunt that in general. Like we could have easily went out and
Stand on a cottonwood.
got into a
Yeah.
tree and just sat a funnel for 2 weeks and waited, and I'm sure something worth shooting would have walked by us. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like I have no doubt, right? But we both kind of agreed, like when we were planning to go out, we both were like, look, I don't want to go sit in a tree for 2 weeks and just like plop my ass down somewhere and hope against hope that like I see something. I want to go glass deer. I want to Cherokee these things. I want to whitetail adrenaline them. I want to like find them, glass them, bed them, try to kill them. I want to glass them cutting a doe out of a field, and I want to run like a wild man through the woods and try to cut them off. Like that's the experience that we wanted to have. And you know, fortunately, I got a road dog. You know that
Show the shirt.
dog.
Show the
DAWG
shirt.
dog. Yeah, there's a DAWG that people look it up on Urban Dictionary. There's it's just like you have to have the right hunting partner to do that kind of stuff.
Sure.
Because we had to both go into it knowing like
On the same page from the start.
right,
Yeah.
we've never done this before.
Yeah, we're gonna screw it up a handful of times.
I'm gonna sometimes run a camera and a decoy. You're gonna sometimes run a camera and a decoy. So it wasn't like every spot or every specific hunt was like mine. So you got to be selfless and being willing to help the other guy try to fill a tag and stuff like that. And so you really have to have the right partner to go do stuff like that. Because if you don't, it could be really miserable. Because it was some tough hunting. There were days where we didn't see. I mean, there were days we spent driving where we didn't see a deer while we were driving.
Yeah.
You know, and
Peak
Or
rut.
I mean, there was a day I don't think we saw any deer, and then there was a day we saw deer, but I don't know if that we saw deer on something that we could had access to.
yeah,
So,
100%.
yeah, I mean, there were a couple days in there that were tough.
And we spent multiple days in a row driving where we didn't even get in the woods really.
Yeah, in the afternoons or the mornings or vice versa. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like it's a different way to do it, and you got to just be mentally prepared to know that it's going to be different if that's not something you're used to doing, and you got to have the right partner to go do it.
So if you do draw next year, what's one thing right away that you'll do differently?
Go hunt where Chad hunted this year.
Good answer. Fair answer.
No, actually, I would go back to that piece that I had on the last day because that was aside from Chad had some really good encounters. I know you guys already talked about it. For 2 days, right? In the second day, killing that deer. Aside from that, we don't know what that piece looked like 2 days before that, 4 days after that. I mean, we did hunt it after you killed, and we didn't see.
There were bird hunters in there.
A lot of bird hunters, and that changed the whole dynamic.
Yes.
For a lot of places.
Yeah.
I would probably personally go back to the last piece that we were at where I had those encounters because we had the most consistent kind of visuals.
That's where we glassed the most deer.
Yeah, glassed the most
where
deer.
you had the most encounters.
Where we had the most encounters, and they weren't like far encounters. Like we were in the game each encounter. We were within bow range with each of them. And so I would probably go back there. As far as what to learn, it's something Chad figured out, and it's how we started kind of qualifying parcels because this is ultimately. I mean, you scouted that piece where you killed that deer in the spring,
right?
But it was what you noticed when you got there and saw it, and then in hindsight, why it really kind of worked. Aside from finding the bed and like all the right stuff that you did, but there's so much standing crop out there still. And I think that was the one thing that was different for someone who coming from Pennsylvania or Ohio, where it's like most of the crops are off when we hit October a lot of times, right? Well, out there's still a ton of like standing corn. There's still a ton of standing milo, millet, like whatever. A lot of it's still standing, or they'll have rows cut out of it. Well, they're bedding in there, right? And so if you got a huge chunk and you got a little bit of pressure on a piece, and there was more pressure out there than I thought we would see. It wasn't like it was Pennsylvania,
areas,
but there were pockets where it's like, and these pieces don't hunt real big either. You'll have a draw.
That's just it.
Yeah, you'll have a draw with like CRP all around it, and if you haven't glassed a deer in that CRP, you're just able to hunt that draw on that section, and that's it. You know what I mean, kind of thing. And so if there's one guy in there, it's you're kind of done. You know what I mean? Either that or you're going to be boogering each other up.
Sure.
And so what we ended up doing when we found the last piece that we were on, when we were driving, we weren't even really looking at the draws anymore and like the terrain or the topo or habitat or anything like that. We were just literally going, okay, this piece looks good. Let's drive to it. Let's drive around it. And what we were really we wanted to find a piece that had a little bit of timber where they could kind of hide, and then all the crops on the adjacent properties are out. Or that the closest crops to it are far enough away that it's not going to impact like the bedding situation.
The edge of where they want to bed on the edge.
Yeah. Right. And so once we started doing that, that's when we started finding pieces where that's ultimately how we found the last spot that we were at, because the closest crops, we could see them, but that piece was big enough, and the deer in this corner of the piece were never going to probably make it over to that standing crop field that we can glass and see that's 2 miles away. Or they might, but we're going to see them. You know what I mean? Because they're going to skyline themselves across that top, or they're going to run that bottom and run into us somewhere. You know what I mean? So that was kind of the learning curve as far as just strategically trying to find the right piece to be on. And then there's a whole host of things from the ground that I learned that I need to do different and do better. That you can watch someone do it on a video. You can read about it. You can listen to someone talk about it on a podcast, but until you actually go out and just do it for 2 weeks straight, you don't really realize like the small little things that you need to kind of take into account and until like those are the reasons why you screwed up, you know, or why you lost an opportunity or whatever. So
gotta get those reps.
That's just it, man.
3 years worth of reps in 2 or 14 days for you.
Yeah.
In comparison to what you do in Pennsylvania. Speaking of Pennsylvania, so you've ran a lot of cameras in Ohio. Mm-hmm. You've started exploring a different part of Pennsylvania.
I have. There's no big deer in Pennsylvania.
Are those same strategies, transferable to where you're at, or is the same principles, or are you learning little nuances that are different?
Yeah, so there's a lot of similarities. So a lot of what, I've learned from hanging cameras with Chad in Ohio and from you guys collectively of like how I'm paying attention to like annual data and stuff like that, definitely using those strategies. So like those baseline things are the same, looking for, normal things that we would always look for, which are like those terrain features, that are topography that's all kind of coalescing in one area and kind of coming together, creating, multiple things, multiple puzzle pieces essentially, right? It's a little harder in this piece to have because there's not a ton of like up, down, right? It's a lot of side hill and tops and stuff like that are really kind of broad and flat. So you don't get nearly as much undulation. It's going to kind of create those like obvious places where things are kind of connecting. You're not going to see a lot of it on a map. Like you're going to have to walk it and see it. And it's huge, so that's hard. But I have started kind of picking up on like certain little, nuances that are different. There's a lot of, mountaintop swamps in these places, and you would look at the tops of these things and knowing that they're flat, you walk through it and you're like, I don't think a deer ever would live here. You know what I mean? But they're really kind of spending time in some of these like mountaintop swamp areas.
So describe that. I have no clue what that. I'm trying to explain that a little bit better so I can understand.
So
what a mountaintop swamp
we'll say,
is.
for example, like if let's just say you're in southern Ohio, right? And you're working the mountains down there in the ridges. Like those are typically look like spinebacks, right?
Okay.
It's like where you have a ridge that has however many feet of elevation that you're climbing, 800 feet or whatever it is, right? And then you've got a top. In some areas it might be 10 yards wide. Some areas it might be 20 yards wide. Some areas it might only be 5 yards wide, where it's just like enough to walk, like a path to walk down, right? These places are like the highest like elevation is probably like 2,500 feet or whatever. And it'll be almost vert at some places, right? So the side hilling's crazy, right? There's not a lot of like benches necessarily either. And then when you get on the top, it is flat. It's like a tundra, you know what I mean? With a lot of just like, it's not pole timber, but it's just like really, really open terrain. Not a lot of undulation that's going to move deer. And because of that, you'll get some low-lying areas that gather water and create bogs and swamps on top, right? And you'll run into a place on the top of a mountain where it's just like nothing but reeds or frag or whatever. And then a bunch of mountain laurel and stuff like that too, so it just gets like really gnarly thick. And that's a lot of times, this is what I'm learning. I didn't know this at first. Truthfully, some of this is newer information for me because I've always kind of looked at mountaintop swamps, even locally where I live, but they're just not as significant there. Here, what I've kind of learned by befriending and getting to know a forester or two that works that area and picking their brain a little bit, getting the trail camera data that I have, knowing what timestamps some of those things are related to it being close to a cut, and then talking to some of these foresters and them telling me like, hey, it's these areas that you want to focus on, and then looking back to say, this is where my camera is. This is the time that deer is coming through. This is where that swamp bedding opportunity is or cover opportunity is. Does that match the amount of time it would take for him to get from here to here as he's traveling to a cut to feed at night or whatever? And so that's what I'm kind of going through now, and that's kind of what's mapping out now. So the difference is that I'm still using the longitudinal data, right? So I'm looking at it long term, and I'm focusing on primary scrapes and community scrapes when I can find them, but I'm having to change it up just a little bit because I'm having to focus on terrain and topography that I'm typically not doing a whole lot with, right? I'll hunt some low-lying swamps near me, but mountaintop swamps not a whole lot, right? And so there's a lot of elevation climb that kind of goes in with that. It's not real easy to get in quiet, so even if you know that they're there, you probably can't hunt them there. You have to figure out like what the in-between place is, and there's not a ton of, again, topography change and pinching and stuff like that you typically will get in like hill country or places with like, significant ridges. And so figuring out where the interception point is a lot harder, you know, because you don't have that like, oh, it's obvious if he's coming from here and going to here, here's a pinch, a saddle, or something he's going to have to traverse through. It's not quite that clear.
And you like to hunt there?
I do. Yeah. I do. And the
Twisted perception.
Yeah. It's, you know, I mean, it remains to be seen, right? Like last year was the first year that I really scouted it. I hunted it 3 days this year. I got really great inventory. I ended up moving some cameras around in October. And when I went back in late season and did some still hunting and some scouting and checked those cameras, I had some daylight activity going on. And so it's like I'm starting to kind of put the puzzle pieces together, and I found some really great sign in an area that would be, you know, what I would kind of probably consider a thermal hub, you know, and it was the most amount of scrapes and rubs concentrated in one area. And it's a really kind of obvious overlooked place, you know what I mean? Where it's like whenever I saw it, I was like, makes sense. You know, it's like if I would have thought about it more strategically, whenever I was seeing where I was getting photos, you know, and directionally where they were traveling from, you know, it probably would have led me here sooner. But, you know, it took me a minute to try to put the puzzle pieces together.
So after running cameras there for a year, scouting, on record, percentage you feel attacked there next year?
I've always said starting like with this place, I thought it was a 3-year plan.
Okay.
I
so
thought
you'll be year 2.
Year 2. I wouldn't say that it's out of the question that I could get something done there. I think it'll depend. It'll depend a lot on what I learn in the next 2 to 3 months.
Well, yeah, postseason scouting now, yeah.
Yeah, because I plan to get up there hopefully in the next 2 weeks and make a couple trips and use what I've kind of learned from the info that I already have, plus what I've been kind of learning from the foresters and stuff like that, and make a plan. And there's a couple deer up there. I was telling Chad, I was like, there's one deer in particular.
There's a couple good ones, man.
There's a couple good ones, but there's one in particular that I know made it through gun season. He lost the left side of his shed or left side of his antlers. And if he makes it, well, I know he made it, but if I can get enough intel on him, I would maybe skip going to Kansas. So if I can produce enough intel the next
Confidence
two
to
3
park
months
there
before I have to decide whether I'm going to get a Kansas tag or not, I would spend my time there and try to kill him, because there's not going to be very many times probably in my life I'm going to get a chance to try to hunt that caliber of deer in Pennsylvania in the mountains.
Sure. That's pretty exciting stuff. So what if you don't draw Kansas? Then are you just going to focus on Pennsylvania?
If I don't draw Kansas, if I know where that deer is for sure, you know, or if I know where one of the other 2 or 3 other bigger ones that I know of up there, if I have a beat on any of them, probably PA, just because I think it would be fun to do that and expedite the year, you know, by a year. If not, then I'm probably going to try to head back to Missouri, where I stuck that one and lost it.
Yeah.
That was a great piece. Awesome hunt when Chad and I were there. I mean, we were there 36 hours, saw 150-inch deer, 160-inch deer. You saw 130 that you missed, and I stuck one and lost within 36 hours.
Jam-packed.
Yeah, so I'm like, I got to make it back there at some point, you know, and it's awesome with predominantly water access and stuff like that. So it's a good piece that is under the radar and not well known beyond the locals.
You guys bring a boat then?
We had when we were there the first time. Zach had one. You know,
okay.
I've got a kayak that I would probably take, but this body of water might not be a little more than I would like to traverse with my kayak solo.
Little whitecaps?
It's a fair chunk of water, you know. As long as I stay closer to the shore, I'd probably be comfortable. But
I'm gonna ask a few more discovery questions, see if we can tip it. I'm just
I
kidding.
I see where it's going.
yeah.
I'm just kidding.
Yeah, there's waves. Waves
Yeah.
are crashing.
I didn't know there was a Great Lake in Missouri. So, I mean, how long have you had the podcast, Truth from Stan?
It'll be 6 years old in June.
6 years old.
Yeah.
Okay. So you started 1 year into Exit. I mean,
Yeah.
similar
Yeah.
start time.
early.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was, I mean, I learned about you guys from a podcast I think that you were on. And I was like, hey, I should talk to these guys. And that was really kind of how.
Whose
how it started.
podcast? Do you remember whose it was?
I think it was Dan, actually.
Oh, it might have been
Okay.
Pretty sure it was Dan.
nine
Small
finger.
world.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So what's one?
It's like episode 5 or something like.
Mine for the
Yeah, it was
truth. Oh yeah,
early.
yeah. It was like episode 5 or something like
Yeah,
that.
it was early.
It was like
Yeah.
it was one of the early ones where I sounded like I had a speech impediment. You know, like
What was the impediment?
just that I sounded like I had taken a lot of Thorazine. You know, it's like you know, it was like a real slow talker. You know, it was like Welcome to the Truthfulness Stand podcast. I'm your host. It sounded like, I was in the 70s and someone gave me a bunch of lewds,
Well, so the reason I asked that is
spice it up a little,
What's the biggest lesson or takeaway you've learned over the last 6 years and however many hundreds of episodes you've done?
When someone asks you to sign an autograph, you ask to sign their man boob.
Never forget.
No,
I'm gonna hold it back.
So after 6 years, what is
Biggest takeaway, lesson?
about the podcast or hunting?
Whatever the biggest takeaway is for you.
Man, I'll do both. I think the biggest takeaway for me from a hunting perspective is that you just everyone is their own worst enemy, and you continually get in your way and keep yourself from doing things that you ultimately should do that are going to make you better because you're scared to fail. That's like a human trait. I don't think that's unique to anybody, right? But what I've kind of noticed or found is like all these high-level guys that we've had a chance to talk to, and you guys have talked to them just as well as I have, is that it's that willingness to accept that there's going to be a certain amount of failure that's going to have to come along with it, And it's kind of an in vogue thing to talk about now about failure. It's like 5 years ago when I first started, 6 years ago when I first started doing the podcast, like you never heard anybody talk about that. Now it seems like it's kind of like the cool thing to talk about, but it's not like just saying like, yeah, I'm okay to fail. It's like, no, you really have to put yourself out there, and try to build a plan. And that's the hard part. It's like you build a plan, you put in the work, and you still know at best it's like maybe you got a 50% chance. Mm-hmm. If you're unfamiliar with an area, and so in saying that, it's like the biggest thing for me is just exploring new ground always. You know what I mean? Like scouting new stuff, even if you're not going to hunt it, hunt stuff that you've never hunted before, even if you've not scouted it. It's like it's those types of things I think for me that have made the biggest difference, not just in learning, but just in my enjoyment in general. In hunting. I think from a podcast perspective, my biggest takeaway is that over the course of 6 years, I've learned pretty quickly how to read people who are there or into things for the right intentions and who are there with the wrong intentions. I hate ever calling things an industry because it feels like a bastardization of it, of people just trying to extract money or resources from it without giving back. And there are plenty of folks that do that, but there are plenty of folks that are, contributing way more than they take from it. And I think as you kind of go and maybe you start to get a little bit jaded, or I just assume that you get a little bit more keen as to like taking people for what they show you, when they show you who they are, believe them, and I think that that's becoming more and more readily apparent, that people are it's a lot harder for people to hide behind a thin veil that they want to create online of what their intentions really are. It's really, really kind of easy. It's a really, really thin veneer that becomes really transparent really fast. And I think that's a good thing. Yeah, let's not do that.
Do you have any clear examples that you can share on it?
No, I don't have to. I don't think I have to give examples because I think anybody who follows things on,
people can see through it.
Yeah, anybody who follows people on Instagram, on YouTube, on their podcasts or whatever, I think the great kind of example of that is, and it's not a specific example of anybody, is when someone's in hard and out fast. You know what I mean? It's like they came in with like full of piss and vinegar and they're going to change the world, and then they were out whenever they didn't get the benefit they thought they were going to get from getting in. And so whoever that is that you've seen do that, it's those people. So whoever they are, I don't need to name names, and people have probably seen those folks. Yep. And then there's some that are it's a little more covert. You know what I mean? And I think some people, they're not necessarily attempting to do it. I think when you get sucked into the machine of the outdoor industry, and it's funny because I literally just listened to Andy May talk about this, like where it's like and Tony Peterson made a good point about it, and he and I have talked about it like offline, and a little bit on my podcast, but I don't think people, and he articulated it really well, and so I want to give Tony credit for like when he mentioned it, that what people don't see in the background of like influencers and like the relationships that they have to have with like these certain brands, and like one year it's these deliverables, the next year the deliverables become more, and so they have to become more of a hunting industry whore, if you will, right? I'm going to use a strong term there because I don't have a better one. And you know what I mean? It's like what they don't see is like they're forced to make a decision. Do I continue to put out, or do I restrict my opportunities? You know what I mean? And that's a decision everyone who's doing this type of stuff has to make for themselves and on their own. Like, what's your breaking point? You know what I mean? Or what are you in it for? You know, I get asked a lot, would I ever do the podcast like full time if I had the opportunity? And I always say like 75% no, 25% yes. You know, and it's not just straight monetary reasons. It's, would it be the same and would I like it the same if I had the chance to do that, or would it turn into something that I would grow to hate? Because that's exactly whenever I was in a band and I was touring and stuff like that. That's ultimately why I left, because it started off as like a passion for art in the auditory art, and it turned into a business that became a commercialized version of the thing it was intended to be, and I hated it at that point, and I left. And so I don't really ever want to take something that is as pure and as like that is as fundamental and foundational to the human experience that hunting is, and turn it into something that I grow to hate. So for that reason, it would be really hard for me to do the podcast thing that I do for a living. Work for a company maybe as in a marketing capacity, would totally love to do that, right? But from a podcast thing that is something that to me is just like an honest expression of how I think about hunting and why I love it.
Yeah.
It would be really hard for me to like, you know, suck the corporate teat to make the money to get out of my day-to-day job.
The least corporate industry, though.
The least corporate industry for sure. Sure. But, you know, there's a compromise you still have to make. You know what I mean? And like anyone who thinks that they don't, there's not very many of those folks in any industry that don't get to do that. Joe Rogan might be the example. Like, he might be one of the few. Even in a passion industry like this, there is still compromise as a creator that you have to make in order to secure the contracts, the relationships, the funds, and things of that nature.
Which I think that might be one of the fun things that we have too. I mean, we really answered in that one.
Yeah, I mean, I've mentioned that. Like, what I really appreciate about what you guys have done that has been really, really smart. And, you know, I've talked about it with different people just offline that, you know, that we all know mutually or whatever, is that you guys have insulated yourselves from that through your ability to create your own marketing. You know, that you're not reliant upon, you know, you're not asking me to do things as a partner of yours that would put me in a position to have to make a choice between working with you guys or doing the things, my podcast, the way I want to do it. Right. The reason why you guys are able to do that is because you run a successful podcast and are able to kind of do what you want to do from a media standpoint through that. You have your successful YouTube channel that allows you to do the marketing and put out the content that you want to do that provides the perspective of Exodus, right? And you have those channels that are owned, right? Which is driving a lot of your opportunities from a marketing perspective, from a business growth, revenue, blah, 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 blah perspective, right? Not to get down the rabbit hole. But that's what you guys have done so well. So it allows you to kind of own your own destiny. You're not beholden to anybody, right? A lot of people don't have that foresight. A lot of companies don't have that foresight. And so they get into a place of compromise.
Yeah, that's... Don't want to make poor decisions Q1, Q2. That puts you in a bad position Q3, Q4, which is just, you know, you can draw that out as far as you want. But let's say you guys are road dogs. Merch available.
DOG
merch available. Link in description. Get it while it's hot. Limited edition.
So just so everybody knows, the Road Dog shirt is
It's cool.
It's a super cool shirt. It's a picture that when Chad killed his deer, we were doing just some photos the morning after before we went out to hunt.
How many pictures did you get of that deer? 2? Just 2? Because that's all I've ever seen.
I've been catching shit about this for the last 4 months.
I took some really good pictures.
How many pictures you take? I got a couple. That's all you took? That's the only pictures you got from that deer? Yeah, man. Like, I took one picture. I had one good recovery picture. Then we had a long drag, and then we took some pictures the next morning. Yeah, I thought it was pretty sufficient. A couple of them are bangers. I felt like.
Yeah. I took a couple really good photos.
There was one that was really, really, really good. Actually, I printed it.
Yeah. Is it on the internet?
Huh?
I feel like I haven't seen this really, really good picture. Maybe I have.
It's on my phone. I'll show it to you later.
Okay.
Or is it?
Is it like a morning pick? Okay, I know.
Yeah,
what
the
you're
morning sun's coming up.
talking about.
And then, so what Chad ended up doing was setting up the GoPro and pointing it toward the deer as he and I were kind of moving it, getting it in position to take pictures and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so what ended up happening was when you go through that and you look at the stills to pull out of the frames, we got a really cool kind of like moment that was
Natural,
just
yeah.
a natural, candid
Yeah.
moment. You know what I mean? And it was really kind of cool, and it really kind of summarized like the trip and the hunt and stuff like that. And so I made a picture out of it. It's the Road Dog series of shirts because I'm his road dog, he's my road dog. DOG dog, not DAWG. Let's make that clear. And I made shirts and and some other stuff out of it or whatever.
Yeah.
And the whole idea is that we travel a lot together, and it would be cool to do like a whole line of Road Dog shirts that whenever one of us kill in a state together, that we create a shirt and we try to create that candid moment the same way and capture a candid moment to kind of put on a shirt and remember. So that's kind of the idea.
Yeah, that's a banger.
Yeah, I took that picture, man. So
Yeah.
that's going on my business card. Photos.
Your media connection is going to have lifestyle photography.
Right. And that would be an example of coming in hard and leaving fast.
Yep. So, what does deer camp mean to you? I mean, I would say your rut wagon's kind of a deer camp in a way. So, what
is our deer camp? Yeah.
What does deer camp mean to you, in an essence?
You take this one. You take it first.
For me, it's about, I guess, having a sense of adventure and building like a catalog of adventurous memories in different places. I get bored doing the same thing kind of over and over. I mean, it's different from having deer camp in West Virginia with my family, and then like after Thanksgiving or Thanksgiving week in rifle season, it's like you do the family thing. You're not really cut back and like in your like out of your shell. You know what I mean? You're kind of like downplaying. Well, at least me around my family, I'm downplaying my personality a little bit. Got to feel like you just can't. For me, I guess I just can't be myself. But when we're in the trailer, I can do whatever the hell I want. Clint, because he doesn't care, and that's like, to me, that's part of the awesome thing is like I could be in a bad mood and I know that he's going to be positive, and regardless of what happened. It could be the worst freaking day on earth, and I know there'll be some moral support there to like get me back up, or vice versa. Sometimes it's it's a very serious kind of attitude, and then there's other times where like chilling, drinking whiskey, having a glass of bourbon. But for me, I think the most important thing for me is like always having one of us there that's being positive.
Sure.
And both of us like just willing to work your nuts off. And I like those two things to me, like on a long road trip where the odds are stacked against you. What are you laughing at?
I'm just laughing at Clint's jokes before we started this. So work your nuts off. I'm thinking he's already about done that.
Stretching, chewing gum.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Anyways, those having a place or a mobile place, really, because that's what it is, and being able to kind of have that adventurous spirit. It kind of remind me of rodeo a little bit. You're driving, chasing white lines, going all over the place, kind of with reckless abandon a little bit. It's just a lot of freaking fun.
Yeah, because we don't know what's going to happen next.
No,
You know what I mean? That's kind of the beauty of it, and that's I echo everything that he just said. It's the idea of that adventure, and I say this almost any podcast I'm ever on, is that having the right person, buddy to go with is the most important thing, aside from like you even knowing what you're doing from like a deer hunting standpoint,
Sure.
right? Because it will be a broken trip if you don't have that to start with. So I'm super thankful that I have a buddy, like Chad that is down, that is game for the suck. You know what I mean? Because you get into a lot of that, a lot of the time. Like out of 14 days, typically, you can almost bank on like 9 of them sucking. Yeah. You know what I mean? Not that we didn't have fun, but that the odds were just so bad for us that day that we almost had zero chance when we walked out the door that morning.
Right.
And knowing that, to his point, when you come back, you care about it because you both want to do well, and you're both, we're not competitive with each other, but we want to do well. We want to achieve the goal, and so knowing that we're both kind of driven that way, you would think it would make for like a situation where it could get a little like tense or weird or whatever, but it never does, because like we don't place our personal value on the outcome of those hunts. And we both recognize that whether I kill or he kills or neither of us does, we shoot something big, small, or whatever, there's going to be, if he kills, it's going to be me and maybe 2 other people that really care.
Mm-hmm.
That's just it. Yeah.
No one's going to remember it. And if I kill something big or small or whatever, it's going to be him and like 2 other people that really care and really remember it. You know what I mean? And so it's not worth getting worked up over. So I echo everything he said. I think the thing that I would add is like, I remember things in pictures. That's how my mind generally works. Like if I'm trying to remember something or whatever, I take a mental picture of it, and then I do it even when I hunt. Like I'll take a mental snapshot of like a setup, and then if I see it somewhere else, I'm like, oh, this looks like this picture. You know what I mean? That's how I kind of remember things. And so for me, it's even like beyond whenever we're out hunting. Like I walk into the trailer at my house to like get something out of it, and I can immediately see you sitting on the floor eating food out of a can that you never heat up. You know what I mean? I could see you hitting your head off the trailer door 3 days in a row.
Yeah.
And you haven't figured out yet that you need to duck after you've been in it for like 3 different trips. You know what I mean? It's, hunkered down on the side of the road in a ditch in CRP with nothing else around me taking a shit. You know what I mean? It's like, it's stuff like that. It's like those pictures in time. It's almost like a photo album of like spending like when I get old, I'll think back on it. And that's kind of why I did the shirts, because like I'm going to think back on it, that those are some of the best times of my life.
Mm-hmm.
And I got to spend them with a friend that valued those experiences as much as I did, and did his damnedest to make them the best experiences that we could collectively have together. Mm-hmm. And that to me is really what the camp is about. And in hindsight, I didn't know it at the time, but and I think about it in hindsight, like that's really why I built the trailer. Mm-hmm. It was so I could create those memories, those bonds, those relationships. And deer, they're going to come and they're going to go, but the things that will be made with that tool will last a lifetime until I'm gone.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Yeah. So
that was deep, dude.
Yeah.
Jeebus. I think I just had a Will Ferrell moment. Blacked out. Not sure what I just said.
Old school. So this is the hardest transition than ever, but do you use a headlight lamp when you access in the morning?
That, Jake, I love you, man, but that might have been the worst transition ever.
I wanted to do it with a level of irony.
Right?
We got too deep too far. I don't know if people signed up for that.
Oh, man, that's good.
So do you? Or no?
Do I use a headlamp? Yes, I do. I use a headlamp. In fact, bought a new one this year because the previous one, it seems like every year I have one and it dies. And I knew he and I were going to be hunting together a lot this year. Uh-huh. And he hates to use light. Hates it. I have to have something. But I know he won't tolerate like regular light. So I bought a new one for this trip so it would have red light. That way, if I had to use a light, at least it'd be a red light walking in somewhere, and he wouldn't lose his ever-loving mind. Yeah. So, I know you, dude. Like we've done this often enough. It's like I get it. But the cool thing about being in Kansas was like you really never needed to use it. The skies were so clear. Right. In the morning you'd walk out, and it would be. I mean, you could, as long as you weren't. I mean, there wasn't any dark timber there anyway, so it wasn't like an issue. But like you could. I mean, you didn't need anything, unless you did get into like a draw somewhere and you're going over maybe some debris or whatever.
Well, the night we dragged that deer out, we needed lights.
That was a good night to have a light. That was sucky. That's a good picture. I have that mental picture. That's one that'll last for a while. I thought you were going to die.
It was rough.
Yeah. I'm like, dude, you need to go back and get some water.
I did.
And then it took you a little while to get back there, and I'm trying to watch for like a light or something like that. I'm like, man, I hope he didn't fall over and pass out in the middle of the CRP. I don't know if I'll be able to find him.
So you're no light?
No, I'm not 100% like don't carry a light. My thing is, if you don't need it, don't use it.
Sure.
Like if you're on a bright moon night and you can see, like, don't have a light. And then the other thing is, if you are using a light, you don't need a freaking one
35
mega
million lumens.
exactly, and you're shining it all over the place. Like you really like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
So I mean, I don't think there's a problem. Like there's times where I'll pull my phone out and I'll just turn my screen down and turn it on and hold it down to the ground so I could see if I'm in a patch of something thick or I need to get around something. I mean, I'll use it, but not like you're, I don't know, not like a normal person, I guess. I try not to. And that just comes from being in some of open topography, tight, steep terrain stuff where like you're walking on a ridge, like deer on either side, on either ridge, like to your east or west or north or south, are going to see your light swinging, and like it just didn't make a lot of sense.
Well, that, and I think too in some of those scenarios where it's like it's so tight that like that example of being on one of those ridges, like a spine pack, it's like you don't have, like if you go too far to the left, too far to the right, you're going down. It's obvious that you've gotten off the track.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It becomes a little harder when you're in places that Kansas notwithstanding, because you could see with so much of like the moonlight and stuff like that, but places that are really open that you don't have things that are guiding you, you kind of need to be able to, like, can I see something out in front of me that's telling me I'm headed in the right direction? You know, is there like a tree that's out on the horizon I'm kind of going toward? Because I know when I kayak into places, I can't use a light because you can't see shit in a kayak on the water with a light. You know what I mean? So I constantly leave my light off, but I've got a light in the back so other boats could potentially see me or whatever. But what I need to do is I try to catch the horizon, and I know like in certain spots that I'm going to, oh, there's this one tree that sticks up like above all the other trees, and I just need to aim toward that. You know what I mean? And so I'm just aiming the boat toward that spot, and then once I get a little closer, I can start to see, you know, a little bit more distinction. And then I might flip a light on just to kind of, once I get close to shore, to be able to see the shore, so I know exactly where I'm going to go. But in those instances, there, it's like you're just navigating by horizon light marker or something.
Okay, so I follow you on Instagram, obviously. Morning yoga, often.
Yeah.
How does fitness incorporate into your hunting?
So I mean, it's, for me, it's less about hunting and more just about health.
Sure.
You know, and the hunting part is a byproduct, or an advantage. That's a byproduct of me trying to stay in shape. You know, like I've mentioned before, I was in a band on the road for a long time. You know, I won't get into like deep stories with that, but like all the stuff that people talk about bands and on tour that happens, it all happens, and I got to enjoy every bit of it. And so with that, you know, it's a lot of hard living. And so, you know, there came a point in my life where I was like, you know what, I've taken a lot of damage, you know, just per se. I should probably try to do something to, like, you know, prolong and get in shape and take care of myself, you know, as I get older and stuff like that. And my wife's always been like into being healthy and stuff like that. And it's just, so it started off as like me just wanting to be healthier and something we could do together. And now it's just become part of my lifestyle. Like I get up every morning, I work out every morning before work, whether it's yoga, whether it's some HIIT cardio, whether it's throwing kettlebells around. It's all functional weight, in body weight, or, you know, nothing heavier than like a 30-pound kettlebell, because I'm not trying to hurt myself, and I'm not trying to, like, you know, win any, you know, bodybuilding awards. I'm just trying to be functionally strong and healthy. And the translation into hunting is that, you know, whenever the going gets tough, it's like I have enough gas in the tank to do what I need to do, and then it just becomes a mental hurdle and not necessarily a physical hurdle. You know, if it's a physical and mental hurdle, like, you're pretty well screwed. You know, you're pretty much shut down because your mind's already telling you that you can't. When your body's corroborating that story, you're in trouble, right? But if your mind's trying to tell you, man, you don't want to do this, but your body still feels good, you know, then you're good to go. You know, I don't want to make it sound like for whitetail hunting you got to be an Olympian or anything like that, because you don't have to. But if I don't breathe as hard when I'm hiking into somewhere, I'm not going to sweat as much, right? Like, it's just like some of those obvious things. Whenever you're tired and on stand, you know, in a tree for however long, you know, and you're cold and you got to draw your bow back and you haven't drawn it back since you've been sitting in a tree all day, are you strong enough? Are you physically capable of doing it to get the shot off? Are you able to keep your stuff together? You know what I mean? Like, physically, whenever you've got to make that shot, do you have a good base to shoot from? Like, all those things are all physical components of what we do. And so, yeah, sure, it helps. But, you know, if you enjoy going out west and doing things like that, it becomes more critical, because that'll ruin a hunt. You know, it's not very often you're going to ruin a whitetail hunt because you're not in shape, but it might keep you from going that one ridge over where you really need to be. because you're like, man, I'm too tired to go over that next ridge, you know. Well, maybe if you got up, and it doesn't take a lot, man. It's like most of my workouts are like between 20 and 30 minutes. That's it.
Yep.
I hit it hard, hit it fast, get it done with, you
Sure.
know, and then I'm good to go.
Very good. Those are all the questions we have for you today.
Great. I appreciate your guys' time.
Yeah.
This has been wonderful.
Yeah.
We should do it again sometime.
Yes. You may leave the interrogation room now.
Nice.
No, we certainly appreciate it. It's always good to catch up. It's always fun because it's been 2 years since we all sat down, but it feels like not 2 years.
Yeah, I know, man. Well, that's the thing that I you know, enjoy and appreciate. And again, I'm thankful, you know, for the friendship I have with you guys, because, you know, you always know you have good friends when you don't need to talk to each other every day, but whenever you get together, it's like you never left, you know, and that's what I kind of feel like I have with you guys. And so I'm just very appreciative and thankful for that. And hopefully that never changes and we're able to, you know, talk about the stuff we used to do 20 years from now. You know, that's my goal.
Kumbaya.
Kumbaya.
Awesome. Well, so we'll let you give a quick outro of where people can find you if they haven't found you already.
Sure. Truth from the Stand on Instagram, Facebook. I'm mainly on Instagram. So that's pretty much where you can find me. Podcast is anywhere you listen to podcasts. Truth from the Stand Deer Hunting Podcast. Small YouTube channel, which hopefully, now that I'm over the Rona, that I hopefully can start doing some videos and stuff again here in the next year. And then skullbrewcoffeecompany.com. Kick-ass coffee. Don't drink shitty coffee. We got some cool travel packs for anyone who's hunting, scouting, camping, you know, or if you're staying over at your in-laws' house and they drink Folgers.
And how much goes back to conservation?
10%.
10% of your
That's a
purchase
lot.
goes to conservation.
Yeah, it was a passion project.
There you go.
Same
Filled
thing.
two needs. Yeah, it was try to give back, again, what we were talking about earlier, trying to give back more than I take.
Sure.
That's the plan.
Yeah, that's cool. And you started that 3 years ago, 2 years ago?
I think this will be
Three.
year number 3, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Wonderful. Well, thank you once again. Until next time.